going over the manual that we will be using for this. Then we'll give an example of a manuscript that uses mixed methods. Then we will compare and contrast the manuscript and the manual that we use. Evaluate how well the manuscript addressed Gebhardt's challenges, as well as how mixed methods can be applied in IO and organizational psychology.
Yeah. So the manual that we used mainly came from Creswell. He both had a YouTube video that we'll share a link to, and also he had an article in 2009 where it was more of a chapter that dove into mixed methods. And so one thing that's really important with mixed methods is it's not just using quantitative and qualitative methods. Well, all of them use quantitative and qualitative methods. Mixed methods is basically combining these in order to reach a hypothesis or to gain an understanding of the situation that you're looking to evaluate. And so when you're using mixed methods, you might use Likert scale for part of it, and then you'll use survey data to understand what the Likert scale was saying. Within these, so the reason why you do this is because oftentimes questions are more complex than are you happy or not. Oftentimes there are more nuances to this. And also oftentimes questions, people want to dive deeper into them. They care, oftentimes it's kind of doing the why. The why are things going on. When you're looking at philosophy of science, this covers multiple perspectives within it. It would cover post-positive, where it would cover post-positive. It also covers critical ideology, because combining these two, it can, depending on the method that you use, it fits into different philosophies and can fit into multiple at the same time. So with here's a video. We'll link it in the description below. It's from John Creswell. It's about 14 minutes, but it will dive deeper into mixed methods, and it will dive in deeper into some methods that we will present before you. So to start off, we're going to go over with the overview of the manual of mixed methods. So within mixed methods, there are 4 key features. First is collecting multiple types of data, which involves using qualitative and quantitative methods. Then, and this is what makes mixed methods unique, is you must combine these methods into a specific design. And so there are multiple designs that I will present further, but basically these designs are what makes it mixed methods and not just kind of complementary research design. We're using both mixed methods and or using both quantitative and qualitative. And then you must frame the design. So the first design that exists is the convergent design. And this one is using both quantitative and qualitative simultaneously to understand the interpretation. This one would be, you want to measure let's say you want to measure someone's experiences at work. So you'll do like a job satisfaction, and then you'll do a survey, and you're doing it at the same time, and it gains a better understanding of the interpretation. You basically compare the two. So the second one would be explanatory sequential, and this is where you start with quantitative research. With this, you gather your data. You might gather a happiness scale. You'll gather this, you'll get the results, and then from there use the results to date qualitative data. It could be CQR, it could be survey, it could be whatever qualitative method you use, and from this you interpret the quantitative findings that you already found. And so this, I would believe, would be a great this is something you can use for IO, where you have this data, you care more about more in depth about it, like what actual items or different things. And so this is an explanatory sequential design. And then the third one is exploratory sequential design. This is where this you would use if you potentially want to create a scale, or using psychrometrics, where you're not quite sure what you're trying to measure, and that's why you'll start with qualitative first. You'll gain information, you'll basically get an understanding of the area, and then you'll do quantitative data to basically put numbers to it and to make it, to add reliability and validity, and to make a scale that you can measure what you found from the qualitative. And then lastly, you've put it into a framework. And so here are a few examples of frameworks that go with the different designs. So if you're doing convergent, you do an experiment. Pretty straightforward there. Explanatory likes to fit in with, and then with social science, or social science likes to use the explanatory design very well, where you're basically doing the quantitative data, and then you're trying to understand this, you're creating this theory for the qualitative. And the community-based practitioner research is the exploratory. So that would be more towards the critical ideology or the constructivism, where you're trying to understand these experiences that people have, and then gain, you're basically trying to gain quantitative analysis of it. And so.
Thank you, Ben. That was a great overview of our manual. So to kind of explain one area, or to explain further, to explain this process further, we went and used a manuscript by Sarah McCollum, which was Understanding Community-Specific Placement, Exploring Student-Athlete Culture. So in this study, the meanings and opinions around race in college student-athlete culture was examined, both through quantitative and qualitative research. Through this research, we wanted to capture the essence of great myths that may not materialize in the use of quantitative surveys. So, the methods for this one, we first copied the sequential explanatory design, as Ben mentioned, where the first phase is a quantitative design, such as using a survey as we did in this study. And then the second phase was qualitative, where they did focus groups and then also followed up with individual interviews with one-on-one with athletes. So in the first phase, there was a survey that was sent out to 205 sophomores and juniors at a large D1 public university in the northeast of the United States. This survey contained two scales. The first scale was the identification of acquaintance rate scale, which identified people's attitudes toward race. They also included a version of the Marwell-Crown social desirability scale, which indicates a response bias among participants. In the second phase, for the qualitative, they first had small focus groups where 9 sports teams were evaluated, and each sports team would meet within themselves and also divided by gender. There was an even distribution of participants across the sports, as well as an even distribution across gender, so that there was equal size for evaluation for results later. Additionally, they used the information from the focus groups to conduct follow-up interviews with the individuals in order to see if there was a difference in responses when someone was in a group versus when they were one-on-one with the researcher. Going to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
You're good. So, for the results of this manuscript, in the quantitative survey, they found that participants recorded a very low acceptance of greatness among their sample, such as stating things like central course was always wrong, and the However, when we look at the qualitative focus groups and individual interviews, we see a different story. There were several yet pervasive rate myths that came about from these focus groups that found four major themes. First, the misunderstanding of consent, such as student athletes saying oh, it was late at night, or just a misunderstanding of consent. The belief in accidental or fabricated rape, when some of the student athletes said, this women are using rape as an excuse, but it didn't actually happen. The contention that some women provoke rape, such as through what they wear, and also that female athletes were not vulnerable to this. Many of the participants, the female participants, said that in some ways they felt that they would not be subject to rape because of their physical strength, and so they felt that they could fight back in that situation. So these responses reflected rape support attitudes and victim blaming statements. So as you see, there's a perfect contradiction between the quantitative and qualitative results. And we see a different story from looking at both of these. This could be that student athletes, when they were in a focus group with their teammates, they were feeding off of the responses from each other. However, the responses were similarly reported within individual interviews. Additionally, if this study was maybe conducted in present day, where there has been increased awareness around sexual assault in college athletics, there may have been different results. So comparing the mixed method manual requirements with our manuscript, as Ben mentioned, one of the types of mixed method design is sequential explanatory strategy, where you start off with quantitative data collection and analysis, then use that to conduct your quantitative data collection and analysis, and then give an overall interpretation of the entire results. Additionally, one of the requirements for the philosophy of science is how quantitative is used to gather numerical results, and then qualitative allows us to dive deeper and gain insight into those quantitative results. In our manuscript, there was also the use of sequential explanatory design, where quantitative studies were first used as a survey, and then qualitative data collection was used in focus groups and individual interviews. Our manuscript also aligns with the philosophy of science in that the quantitative results indicated the directions of the types of questions that they asked in the qualitative interviews. So evaluating the manuscript, looking at their parts challenges. First of all, this research was not a one-off study. It was actually part of a larger study at the university in which information about sexual violence and student athlete culture was collected from male and female sophomore and junior students during the 2001-2022 school year, and that was also a mixed method study. So this present study that we analyzed is building off of that. There was an extensive literature review where there was background regarding rape culture and sexual violence, specifically among collegiate student athletes. There was a suggested goal and objective and research questions from within this article. However, it was more hinted at but not specifically outlined. There was a clear and thorough construction of definitions, such as around rape myths and sexual violence within the student athlete community. There was specified methodology where the article outlined the details regarding recruitment, the survey and measurement scales, and statistical analyses that were used. And in the discussion and conclusion, discussed the overall opinions of student athletes regarding rape culture and sexual violence, and delved into future implications from this study.
Yep. So now we've discussed an example applied to collegiate athletes. How does this apply to IO psychology? Well, there's a few things. Within IO psychology, oftentimes problems are very complex. We're living a lot of companies are multinational companies. They have different branches. There's so many different aspects. And considering that currently we're kind of in a revolution within the field of work, where back in the Industrial Revolution and going into the 20th century, people were kind of treated more like moving parts and that they're easily replaced. But turns out that's not how things work, and so oftentimes the problems are complex, and mixed methods is great because it helps gain an understanding about these experiences that people have, but also still using quantitative data to measure their experiences, whether it comes to satisfaction, happiness, burnout, different aspects. Also, it's really good for exploratory research because there's so many things within work that we don't know, and as PhD students, we kind of understand that there's so many questions you could ask, and so it's great for exploratory research. It also helps create scales, new scales that haven't necessarily been studied before. It also brings great actionable items because oftentimes we can measure like, hey, here's satisfaction and here's these different aspects, but what things can people within the work environment do? What things can leaders do to actually make a difference? But so those are the pros of using it, but some of the downsides is things are more complex. This research method, doing mixed methods, is more complex, and oftentimes it's not always feasible to do that. Also, sometimes the data we gather isn't always the most clean, and so trying to compare the quantitative and qualitative isn't always the most feasible, and not as much good information can come out of it. So one downside to doing mixed methods within IO is this problem with the data. So an example of it, an example of applied to research is Chambers and Frampton 2022, where they looked at the burnout, stress, and intention to leave from psychiatrists in New Zealand. And how they did this is they used Likert scale questions to measure burnout, stress, and intentions, and then they used surveys to gather workplace experiences. And so with this, they basically used them to find that 1 in 3 psychiatrists were experiencing burnout, and they had the intentions to leave. And some of the main reasons for this was because the high demands of the work and how much was required of them within their profession. And so using this mixed methods, we were able to gather what people's burnout was, these different scales, but they were able to understand better why these things were happening and what aspects of the culture and their what experiences were they having that were leading to this burnout.
Yeah, so as Ben mentioned, this is a very mixed methods research is very complex. It does allow us to gain a more complete and overall understanding of the research. Such as from our manuscript example, we did see that there was inconsistency between the opinions expressed during the quantitative survey and the qualitative focus groups. So if the researcher had just looked at one or the other, they wouldn't have a complete picture. And we wouldn't see that there actually is discrepancy among those student athletes. This therefore allows us, leads to future research where someone could look at, okay, why is there this discrepancy between the quantitative survey and the qualitative focus groups?
Yeah, with this we kind of see that mixed methods is really good at doing exploratory. There's a lot of different areas that it can go down. It can be used to explain things that are already going on. It's also good to look at research from 2 different lenses, kind of convergent, hence the 3 designs. And so it's really good. It is less work than doing all-out qualitative, but again, it requires using multiple different streams of data to come to a conclusion. So it has its pros of being using kind of the best of both worlds, but it can be more complex, and the data can be hard to gather.
Lastly, we wanted to include our references. In light of what we found in our syllabus audits within qualitative class, where the majority of scientific research articles are written by white cis males, we wanted to include articles that were written by minority groups, such as females, in order to create more culturally and socially responsive pedagogy. However, there is still a need for increased research and for us individuals to look for that research that is written by minority groups. So yes, thank you again for watching our presentation on mixed methods qualitative research.
Have a great day, everyone.